What if the voice in your head, the one you trust the most, is the very thing keeping you stuck? Ethan sat on the edge of his bed at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, replaying the same conversation again and again, every word, every pause, every tiny mistake, his mind refusing to let go. Earlier that day, someone had made a simple comment, nothing serious, nothing lasting. Yet in Ethan's mind it grew heavier with every passing minute. He kept asking himself what he should have said, what he could have done better, how things might have turned out differently. And with each thought, another followed, faster, louder, more demanding, like a storm that would not pass. He checked his phone, then put it down, then picked it up again, searching for something to distract him, but the noise inside never stopped. Even when everything around him was quiet, his mind was not. It was crowded, restless, always working, always analyzing, always holding on. Days turned into nights like this, and nights turned into exhaustion, and slowly, without realizing it, Ethan stopped taking action in his life, because every decision felt too heavy, every step required too much thinking, and every moment became something to question instead of something to live. And deep down, he began to wonder, was thinking really helping him? Or was it quietly becoming the very thing that held him back? The next morning, Ethan walked through his day as if he were carrying something invisible but heavy. Every small choice felt like a test he could fail. He stood in front of his closet for 10 minutes, just deciding what to wear, questioning each option as if it mattered more than it did. At work, a simple email took him nearly an hour to write. He read it over and over, changing a word here, a sentence there, worried about how it might be interpreted, what others might think, and whether it was good enough. And while he was still thinking, others had already moved on, made decisions, taken action. During lunch, he sat quietly, barely tasting his food, lost in another loop of thoughts about the past and the future, never fully present in the moment he was living. And slowly, something inside him began to feel tired, not physically, but deeply, as if his mind had been running without rest for days, weeks, maybe even years. He started to notice how often he hesitated, how often he held back, not because he did not know what to do, but because he was afraid of making the wrong move. And that fear kept feeding his thoughts, and his thoughts kept feeding the fear, creating a cycle that never seemed to end. That evening, as he walked home through a quiet park, the sun setting behind the trees, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and gold, Ethan finally stopped for a moment and sat down on a wooden bench, exhaling slowly, feeling the weight of his own mind pressing down on him. And for the first time, he did not try to solve it. He just sat there, wondering how something that felt so natural could also feel so heavy. As he sat there on the bench, watching the last light fade behind the trees, Ethan began to notice something he had never paid attention to before. The world around him was calm. The wind moved gently through the leaves. People walked by without rushing. Everything seemed to exist without effort. Yet inside his mind, nothing felt still. It was as if he was carrying a constant noise that no one else could hear. He realized that even in moments where nothing was wrong, his mind kept searching for something to fix, something to analyze, something to control. And because of that, he never truly felt at peace. Days passed, and this pattern followed him everywhere. At work, at home, even during moments that were meant to be joyful. He found himself thinking instead of experiencing, questioning instead of acting, holding back instead of moving forward. Opportunities came and went, not because he lacked ability, but because he was too busy thinking about the perfect moment, the perfect decision, the perfect outcome. And while he waited for certainty, life quietly moved on without him. One evening, after another long day of hesitation and mental exhaustion, Ethan returned to the same park, drawn back to that bench without knowing why. And as he sat down again, he noticed an old man nearby, sitting in complete stillness, watching the river flow as if he had nowhere else to be. And for some reason Ethan could not explain, he felt a quiet pull to walk toward him, as if something inside him was ready to finally listen. The old man did not look at Ethan right away. He simply continued watching the river as it flowed steadily, as if nothing in the world could disturb its rhythm. And for a moment Ethan just stood there, unsure of what to say, feeling the same familiar noise rising in his mind, questioning whether he should speak, what he should say, and how it might sound, but something about the man's calm presence made those thoughts feel less important. Finally, Ethan sat down beside him, and after a few quiet seconds, he spoke, his voice carrying the weight he had been holding for so long. He said that his mind never stopped, that he was always thinking, always analyzing, always trying to figure everything out, yet somehow feeling more lost than ever. The old man listened without interrupting, his expression soft and steady, as if he had heard this story many times before, and when Ethan finished, expecting advice or some complicated explanation, the man simply reached down beside him, picked up a small glass of water resting near his feet, and gently placed it into Ethan's hands without saying a single word. Ethan looked down at the glass in his hands, the water inside completely still, reflecting the fading light of the evening sky. He felt confused, unsure why something so simple was placed in front of him, as if it carried meaning he could not yet see. For a moment, he just held it, waiting for the man to explain, but no words came. Seconds passed, then a minute, and the silence began to feel uncomfortable. His mind immediately trying to fill the gap, questioning the purpose, searching for answers, creating explanations that only made him more restless. Yet the man beside him remained calm, his eyes still fixed on the river as it flowed without effort. Ethan tightened his grip slightly, holding the glass more firmly as if doing so would reveal something. But instead, he began to notice a faint strain in his hand, subtle at first, barely noticeable, but present. He shifted his fingers, adjusting his hold, trying to make it easier, but the longer he held it, the more aware he became of the tension building. And still, the man said nothing, leaving Ethan alone with the weight of something so light, yet slowly becoming harder to carry. After a while, Ethan could no longer ignore the discomfort in his hand. What once felt effortless now required constant attention. His fingers began to tighten, his wrists slightly tense, and the longer he held the glass, the heavier it seemed to become, even though he knew it had not changed at all. Finally, he turned to the old man and asked, his voice carrying both confusion and frustration, "Why does this feel so heavy?" "It is just a glass of water." The old man slowly shifted his gaze from the river to Ethan, his expression calm, almost gentle, and asked a simple question, "Has the weight of the water changed?" Ethan shook his head. "No, it is the same." The man nodded softly and asked again, "Then why does it hurt more now than when you first held it?" Ethan paused, the question echoing in his mind, and for a brief moment, all his usual thoughts fell silent, replaced by something clearer, something more direct. "Because I have been holding it for too long," he said quietly, and as the words left his mouth, he felt as if he had just uncovered something he had always known but never truly seen before. The old man smiled gently, as if Ethan had just taken his first real step toward understanding, and then he spoke in a calm, steady voice. "Just like that glass, your thoughts are not the problem. They come and go, light and simple, but what makes them heavy is how long you hold on to them." Ethan looked down at the glass again, feeling the truth of those words settle inside him. The man continued, "You believe that by thinking more, you will find control, clarity, or the perfect answer, but instead, you are only tightening your grip, turning something small into something that weighs you down." Ethan felt a quiet shift inside, realizing that all this time he had been trying to solve his thoughts instead of simply letting them pass. The old man then asked softly, "What would happen if you stopped holding it, not fighting it, not analyzing it, just letting it go?" Ethan did not answer right away, because for the first time, he was not thinking of a response. He was actually feeling the question, and in that silence, something inside him began to loosen, as if the weight he had been carrying was no longer as solid as he once believed. The question lingered in the air, simple yet unsettling, and Ethan slowly shifted his gaze to the glass still in his hand. For the first time, he was not trying to analyze it, not trying to understand it with words. He was just aware of it, the weight, the tension, the quiet strain in his fingers, and then, without overthinking, without hesitation, he gently placed the glass down beside him. In that small moment, something unexpected happened. The discomfort vanished instantly, the tension in his hand dissolved, and a subtle sense of relief moved through him. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just quiet and real. He looked at his hand, then back at the glass, realizing how something so simple had felt so heavy only because he chose to keep holding it. The old man nodded slightly, as if this was the only answer that ever mattered, and said softly, "This is what you do with your thoughts. You pick them up, hold them, and refuse to put them down, believing they are important, believing they define you. But the truth is, they only stay because you keep holding them." Ethan felt a stillness he had not experienced in a long time, and for the first time, he began to wonder if freedom was not about controlling his mind, but about learning when to let it rest. The river continued to flow beside them, steady and effortless, as if it had never struggled to move forward, and Ethan sat there in silence, no longer chasing his thoughts, no longer trying to solve everything at once, just breathing, just being. Something inside him had shifted, not in a loud or dramatic way, but in a quiet understanding that felt more real than anything he had thought before. He realized that his mind had not been the enemy. It had only been a tool he never learned to set down, and all this time, he had been carrying things far longer than they needed to be carried. As the sky darkened and the first lights of the evening began to appear, Ethan stood up from the bench, feeling lighter, not because his life had suddenly changed, but because he no longer felt the need to control every thought that came and went. And as he took a few steps away, he paused for a moment, looking back at the glass resting quietly beside the old man, untouched, weightless, exactly as it had always been. And in that moment, Ethan understood something simple but powerful. Peace was never about having fewer thoughts. It was about knowing that you could always put them down.